It starts. For about 20 or more years, during the so-called age of discovery and conquest, or the opening up, loosening, and introduction of the world to the European colonizers and traders, in the name or false name of brotherhood and humanity, came among the darker race, so-called African and black race, or distinction of the human family noted by the European to prove he is separate from the human race which resided before his kind on earth. They came among our ancestors to trade goods, find new routes, survey, study patterns, habits, physical condition, mental conditions, exploration, conquest, language, culture, way of life, and the likes to carry out their ultimate plan of civilization or civilizing, better known as world conquest and colonization. Through the European study, he found those amongst the so-called African that were dissatisfied or disgruntled of sorts. They had a problem with the government administration of affairs, economics, foreign relations, religion, and other things as such. The trader, seeing their dissatisfied citizens, after his patient wait, saw cause and signal for pursuit. He smelled blood. Through the gripe and dissatisfaction was room for manipulation and exploitation. The European befriended the dissatisfied and with vital knowledge from their study began lulling these dissatisfied, disgruntled men into control with false promises of hope. The European spoke of a new world where the roads were paved with gold and was much richer than the land in which they resided. He told them they could earn gold for their labor, more than they could ever make in their own country. He promised them better positions in government and jobs. He told them they would live like kings and queens in this new world. After time, in the continued lulling of these false bedtime stories, these unhappy countrymen were convinced. Before the outright capture, the chains, the shooting, and the trading of slaves by their own kind, things were a little different. Circa 1555, Sir John Hawkins set sail for the New World on the good ship Jesus. On his ship, he had a handful of black men, women, and children. These men, women, and children did not know they were going to be enslaved. This was already premeditated by the European and carefully planned to the detail. His plan was to remove the black man from his way of life, home, land, language, customs, culture, and reprogram him as his servant slave to do his bidding at his very beck and call, to serve him and his kind for the remainder of their life and days. After the success of his first mission, the trader went back to England and bought 2 more ships. He went back to the east, finding more dissatisfied Africans. The European told stories of how their brothers and sisters were asking for them to come visit them in the New World because they were living a better life. Taking the European's word as a trusted friend and religious man, in no time, the European was able to fill his 2 ships with Africans. They did not know their fate as future slaves. Once back to the land, these Africans were put in city-like camps or plantations with the others. The European found that their many years of studies did agree with many of their sciences for the African. But the African was still not fit to be a slave. In order to make a proper slave, some more studying and changes needed to be done. hence the date above as 1555, and said date of slavery didn't start until 1619 through 1622. The European learned valuable points such as how the African prayed, religion, and more. The European knew upon his study and felt they needed to remove the identity and heritage of the African to be successful. They needed a blank slate or blank CPU to upload only the data, actions, and commands that they wanted. While in America, they began their first stage. In this first stage, these men and women and children were watched, surveyed, and studied day and night. They watched very closely, and their every move was written down and documented. Note, missing history of Sir John Hawkins from about 1555 to 1620. In stage 2, whenever the black man and woman had a child, they would separate them immediately. They would take the child to a different part of the camp or plantation in which the child was raised by and oversaw by a white woman. At the age of about 6 or 7, the child was shipped to another plantation in which he or she was mixed with the other children. During the 1600s, other Africans were brought over to mix with this previous tribe, all whom spoke different dialects and language, which made it impossible to communicate. What was learned from the first experiments in the camp was now introduced to everyone. Some plantations could hold up to 5,000 slaves. They continued the process by taking the baby from its mother and turning it over to a white woman or well-trusted black mammy. By the 1700s, the European had produced a new race of people who did not know their names, had no identity, could not speak their language, religion, culture, or history. The next step from here was to install fear. One method was to take a pregnant black woman and tie her hands and feet to a stake. The plantation owner would then call all other plantation owners in the radius to bring their slaves to the plantation. He would then take a knife and cut the baby from the womb while others looked in sheer terror. If the black man or any other tried to come to her aid, he would be shot on sight like a dog. The white man would then drop the baby to the ground and squash the baby's head with his foot. And to this very day, this method and others like it instill fear into the black man and woman to this day. The United States of America came into existence about 1776, after the American Revolution. Off of the backs of Afro-descendants, in less than 150 years, this country would become the greatest and richest country in the world.